So this week's Torah portion is Chukat, which means decrees. And we're going to go into that a little bit later. I want to start with actually something that happens later in the Torah portion. So I want to bring everybody up to speed.
What is it called? I'm sorry.
That's Chukat, which means decrees, the Chukat. There's three categories of mitzvahs. There's Mishpatim, Chukim, and Edus. Chukim are decrees that have no reason. Mishpatim are testimonies, like why do we celebrate Sukkot? Why do we celebrate Hanukkah? Where we're commemorating our history, different things. And Mishpatim are simple mitzvahs that you and I understand. Do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery. Mitzvahs like that. Three categories, but we'll come to that a little bit later, even though the Torah portion does begin with Chukat, decrees. So I want to bring everyone up to speed to the history of what's happening. So the Jews left Egypt, they traveled, they came about to enter into the land of Israel. They sent spies. Remember the story, the tragic story. So God said, as a punishment for speaking Lashon Hara and doubting the ability for God to bring you into Eretz Yisrael, land of Israel, you're now going to have to wander in the desert another 40 years before you enter the land. And over these 40 years, what happened? Most of the men and boys above the age 13 passed away in the desert, as was the punishment that they would not enter into the land, but the next generation and the women would enter into the land. And now it's 40 years later. They're going to be entering the land very soon, Eretz Yisrael. It's very exciting. But the Torah portion opens up inside this story that Miriam passes away in the desert. In this Torah portion, Aaron, her brother, next in line, passes away. And then Moshe is notified by God, as we heard in previous Torah portions from the prophets. Remember the prophecy that, guess what, Moshe, you are not entering into Eretz Yisrael with the people. You too will pass away in the desert, and Joshua, Yehoshua, your successor, your disciple, will enter, will take the people in. Okay, so this is what's happening now. So the Torah portion tells the story Miriam passes away, and suddenly there's no water, which now lets us know how the rock, the well of Miriam, as it was called, was only there because of Miriam. Remember, we discussed many times, that's how we know that the well came from Miriam and her merit. Because when she passes away now in the desert, there's no water. So there was a rolling rock, a traveling fountain of water with pure filtered water, first filter in history. And that's what they had. That's how they drank water in the desert. So now Miriam passes away. There's no water. And a terrible thing happens. And I want to read you straight from the passage of the Torah, because it's always good to hear the original. And it's very important, the entire congregation of the children of Israel arrived at the desert Zin. Miriam passed away there and was buried there. They had no water, so they assembled against Moshe and Aaron. Here they go again. And the people quarreled with Moshe, and they said, if only we died with the death of our brothers. Why did you bring us here in the desert so I and our livestock should die? Why did you even take us out of Egypt? Do you see seeds here? Do you see fig trees? Do you see grapevines, pomegranate trees? There's no water to drink. Okay, so there again, another rebellion, another group of the Jews are now complaining something awful. So Moshe and Aaron, what did they do? They go to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, where they speak to God. And Hashem says to Moshe, take your staff, assemble the people, you and your brother Aaron, and speak to the rock. And it will give forth its water. Its water. And then there'll be water for the people and the livestock to drink. Now look what happens. Terrible. Moshe took the staff before the Lord, and they assembled the people, Moshe and Aaron. And he says to the people, you rebels, can we draw water for you from this rock? And Moshe raises his hand and strikes the rock twice with his staff. An abundance of water gushes forth, and the congregation and their livestock drink. Now, look what happens. God says to Moshe and Aaron, since you did not have faith in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, you shall not bring them into the land for which I have given them. These are the waters of dispute, where the children of Israel contended with the Lord. And this is the end of this story. So to reiterate in our own words, God says to Moshe and Aaron, the Jews have no water, go speak to the rock, and it will give forth its water. They go, Moshe calls the people rebels, hits the rock twice, and the water gushes out, and now they have water. And God says to Moshe, as Rashi says, you hit the rock instead of speaking to it. You had an opportunity to sanctify my name by speaking to the rock. Now you're not going into the land of Israel. There are so many questions here. There's so much innuendo here. What's going on here? First of all, does the punishment fit the crime? He hits the rock, and that's why he's not going to the land of Israel? 1. 2, I have to read you a story that happened in Exodus. Listen carefully. Another story. Do you remember this happened once before? In Parshas Beshalach in Exodus? The entire The entire community was journeying. They camped in Rephidim. There was no water. So the people quarreled with Moshe, give us water. The people thirsted for water and they complained. And Moshe cried out to Hashem, what should I do? They're going to stone me. And God said to Moshe, take the elders, take your staff, for which you struck the Nile. Remember, he hit the Nile to turn it into blood. And I shall stand before you on the rock, strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, and the people will drink. Moshe did so before the eyes of the elders of Israel, and water came out. So now, 40 years ago, in Rephidim, the same thing happened. They complained there was no water. They're dying of thirst. Moshe speaks to God. God says, take the staff, that special staff, hit the rock, and water will come out. And that's what Moshe did, and water comes out. Now, 40 years later, Moshe hits the rock again. Why now is he being punished? There was a precedent set to hit the rock and get the water.
Because it's not exactly what God said.
Right, but why? So why, first of all, why did God say speak here and there hit? And he hit the rock. So there was already a precedent. He hit the rock once before and water came out. And by the way, if God didn't want the Jewish people to have water because of hitting the rock, why did water come out? Why did God allow the water to come out? It was all a miracle anyway. It's not like he hit the rock and God said, oh, you hit the rock, you didn't speak to it, I'm not giving you water. God gives water.
That is interesting.
So first of all, does anybody have any insights, or anybody want to answer the questions, any of the questions we posed? And then we're going to weave a whole tapestry here, because to me, this is one of the most fascinating insights.
Well, maybe since it's perhaps a new beginning, and so they're going to do things in different ways now. So instead of striking, we're going to speak, and that there's a difference, and he's not ready to make a change.
Okay, very good. So there's a new paradigm, there's a new reality setting in.
Right.
Very, very good, Margaret. You want to take over the class? Continue?
That's it.
Anybody else want to add anything to that? Diane, you said you want to add something? be shy. No answer is wrong. Not in this class anyway. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that their approach was different. Their genuine, they weren't genuine this time. I don't know, maybe their attitude was wrong, how they approached it.
The Jewish people, the nation, were not genuine. Possibly. It's hard to get into every psychological emotion, but yeah, possibly. So anybody else want to say anything, add anything before we delve deeper? I want to add a little bit more to the perplexing scenario here. So Moshe committed one sin, right? He hit the rock. But there's over 100 commentaries that discuss what the sin was. I want to share a few just to give us perspective. It's nice to hear a little bit. So for one sin, guys, hundreds of scenarios have come to play here. Very interesting.
Wow.
So I gathered a few of the commentaries just to share with you. So
Rita,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I just had a question.
Yeah.
Is there a part in here where Moshe holds up the staff and puts his hand on his heart? Is that in this parsha or a different one?
I have to go read the text. Let me look quickly. You know what? I'll look at it in a minute.
Okay.
You read somewhere that he put his hand over his heart?
No, I had heard a beautiful commentary on it once, but I don't remember if it was in this parsha because it was in relation to raising children and kind of like, not spare the rod, spoil the child, but, that first you have to give them from your heart, but you have to also know when to do it with firmness when you're holding up your staff, not necessarily to hit them, but it's about the combination, and I don't know if it relates to here or.
It does. This is in this thing. This is what I'm getting to in 1 minute. Beautiful,
Okay.
beautiful. Along what Margaret said. Very beautiful, exactly. Yes. This is that Torah portion, Paula.
Got it. Okay.
So before we go delve a little bit into this, I want to just give a little bit more background because it gives a little bit stronger perspective. So there's, like I said, over 100 commentaries say what happened here. So Rashi says, very simple. God said, talk to the rock. He hit the rock. That was his sin. The Rambam, Maimonides, says, oh, it's the fact that he called the Jews rebels. You rebels, he says. You rebels. You rebels.
You mean rebels?
Rebels, sorry. Rebels,
Yeah.
very good. Rebels. You rebels. He denigrated them. He called them rebels. So God says, you called my people rebels. Ramban says that Moshe and Aaron, what do they say to the Jewish people? We will take water out of the rock.
Ah.
He said God is going to take water out of the rock.
Oh.
So see, that's the transgression.
Yeah, that sounds serious. Right.
And then the last commentary I want to share, because there's so many, this was another interesting insight, that why did they even go to God? Why did they even go over to God and say, God, guess what? The people are complaining, there's no water. God knows what's happening over there. He knows Miriam passed away, the well has disappeared. Why go to God? Didn't they have confidence and faith in God, Moshe and Aaron, that God will step in and say, yeah, what are we going to do about the water situation? We need a pipeline from Alaska. Right? So one commentary says that was the sin, that they didn't just ride it out, so to speak. But whatever version you take, I don't find any of these commentaries really, literally, really get to the heart of the matter. God forbid not that the commentaries are not great. It's just I feel we need to dig into deeper, and that's what we're going to do. And that's why it's so important that we read about the earlier story to get understanding of the new story. So Paula mentioned very wisely that this whole thing that's happening here, everything that happens, is not only the story Moshe hit the rock, the water came out, the water did come out. It's everything is for a lesson for eternity. If you go back into the history of the previous story, there's a few terms that are different. And those usage of those words and those meanings show us there's a difference in what happened. Let's go back to the earlier story. In the earlier story, right when they left Egypt and there was no water, God says to Moshe, hit the rock, right? How does he call a rock there? Does anybody know how to say rock in Hebrew? Tzur. 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 Hit the rock and water will come out of it and the people will drink. Water will come out of it and the people will drink. And that's what he did. He hits the rock and water comes out. This week's Torah portion, God called, the rock here is called by a different name. It's called Selah. 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 You know the famous Hasidic song, on the rock I'll bang, bang, bang. On the rock I'll bang, bang, bang. On the rock I'll bang, bang, and water will come out. Allah Selah, ha, ha. On the rock you bang, bang, bang. It's using a different type of a rock, Selah. And look what God says to Moshe. Speak to the rock, and it will give forth its water. Its water means the water belongs to it. When Moshe hits the rock, what happens? An abundance of water gushed forth from the rock. It doesn't say its water. Water gushed out. And that also is a very important distinction. Again, God says if you speak to the rock, its water will come out. But when Moshe hits the rock, it says the water gushed out, not its water. So really what's happening here is a transformation of the people, of the mindset, of education, of the approach, of how things are done then and now. The Jews were slaves in Egypt. They were tortured, they were persecuted, they were hit. Well, slave, how do people in a communist society, in a, what's another name for, in a society that the oppressive society, monarchs, how do they get the people to fall into place? Through coercion, suffering, pain. You know that if you don't listen and give the taxes to the Lord, they're going to come, behead you, kill you, put you in prison, and go after your family. Coercion. Coercion. That's why people listen. They're coerced. They're forced. If every time you did something wrong, you spoke gossip, a lightning would hit you on the head, you'd never speak gossip. You'd never do anything wrong, right? Because you know you're going to be hit by lightning or you're going to be electrocuted or whatever. So slaves were brought up, the Jewish people in Egypt were brought up with the slave mentality. They were beaten and they were coerced and they were forced to build pyramids for the pharaoh. And that's how the language they understood, unfortunately. So like we discussed, why did we need 10 plagues based on Hasidus and Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism? Why did God have to do all the miracles? Why not one miracle, put them on the wings of an eagle, whoop, bring them into Israel? Because there had to become a transformation of the mental and emotional state. You could take a slave out of Egypt, but can you take slavery out of the Jew? So slowly over the years, there had to be a transformation from the concept of I was a slave, I was beaten, I was hurt every time I didn't do what was said. My children were thrown into the Nile River at birth. So education then, the approach then, they understood pain. They understood hitting. They understood a good fight, so to speak. There, Moshe's told to hit the rock because it's right after they left Egypt. Everything was about hitting, patching, plagues. So he hits the rock and water comes out, sanctifies God's name then, because that's the language they understood. When Moshe sees the Egyptian police guard about to kill a Jew, what does Moshe do? Moshe kills the guard. Moshe also uses force in Egypt because that was the way. Moshe didn't say, guard, come sit down, let's discuss our differences here. Fellow there is my brethren. He should not be enslaved. Let's negotiate here. Don't hurt him. Moshe saw a Jew was about to be killed. He stepped in, He kills the Egyptian soldier. He kills the Egyptian guard. That was the language spoken then. Now, 40 years later, the new babies are born. They're growing up. They're a more sophisticated group of, maybe not even more sophisticated. They grew up in freedom. They grew up with manna from heaven, God speaking to Moshe, their clothing washed like a laundromat, a pillar of flame at night, a cloud of glory by day, the elders teaching them Torah, everything given to them, everything provided them. They grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth. They don't remember the stories of how their parents were suffering, beaten, and brutalized in Egypt, and their brothers and sisters taken away, girls brought into Egyptian homes, brothers thrown into the Nile River to be killed. They don't remember the stories. They weren't there. It's like us hearing the stories of the Holocaust. We're horrified, we're in pain, but we weren't there. There's a new generation now. That generation is called a Tzura, rock. Hard through and through. It's a rock. You break it, there's more rock. You break it again, there's even more rock. Sela is a soft rock. It's a rock that has moisture. It's a rock that when you break it, you'll feel moisture in it. There's inside, there's softness. So God said, there, you hit the rock. Water came out, but not its water. When push comes to shove, you beat a slave, you'll get the pyramid built. But it's not his pyramid. He's only building a pyramid not out of love, not of, oh, my beautiful architecture. I'm forced to build the pyramid. I don't even want to build the pyramid. I want nothing to do with this pyramid. But when a rock, a cell, it's give forth its water. It's giving forth through sweet words, through talking, educating, through words and compassion and love, it's going to give out its water.
Now, he didn't tell him what words to say. Interesting.
You mean what he would say to the rock?
Yeah.
Please give us water. We need water.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure there's a medrash on it. I just
Yeah.
So you understand, God is not only telling him how to get water out of the rock per se. God is saying to Moshe, there's a new reality now. Now the people are not the people who were slaves. And remember pain. These are new generation. Them you have to speak to. Education through speech, education through lessons, education through talking. But he tells Moshe, take your staff and speak to the rock. What do you need the staff for? Because to show that even with compassion, even when you use words, even when you want to teach somebody a lesson, a child, a peer, an employee, whoever you're in the relationship with, you need discipline. You need boundaries. It's not all about, oh, honey, yes, you're doing the right thing. Go ahead, eat the poison. Even when you're educating with kindness and compassion and sweetness and honey, you still need a staff. In a sense, you still need boundaries and discipline. Not everything goes. Not everything goes. So what God says to Moshe,
That's the commentary I heard.
that's the one you heard? Then
Yeah.
rock was necessary. That's the language they understood then. Now they understand the language of words, talking, expressing yourself. Like, a kid sits on the floor throwing a tantrum. You say, honey, what do you want? Use words. Don't throw your toys at me. Use words. We tell children all the time, use words. I want to share Yalkut Shmoni on this because it will give us a little bit insight. Yalkut Shmoni, classic commentary. Speak to the rock. Don't strike it. God tells Moshe, when a lad is young, the educator at times might use force, coercion. But when he grows into adulthood, the educator must rebuke him only verbally. Similarly, when a rock was but a small child, I told you to strike it. But now, 40 years later, you must speak to it, teach it a chapter of Torah, and it will produce water. Yalkut Shmoni is underlining this whole idea that now it's a new reality. It's a new reality. Now the approach has to be a whole different approach. It has to be approach of using words, education. And you see also, even now in our generation, how many people One father told me in Cheder, he got rapped on the knuckles with the ruler, and the teacher put him in the corner. They used very severe methods of discipline. They gave a patch. My brothers in yeshiva got a patch. Now you patch, police, 911. This teacher is abusive. Now you don't dare touch a child. In the olden days, patching, a patch, a slap, a dunce cap was part of the reality of education. Now we have so much of a better system in our lives. Thank God we're raising our children with kindness, with compassion. But again, discipline is necessary, but not in a coercive manner. And that's where the last point is. You want it to give its water, or you want it to give your water or water. You want to draw out the best in a person, then draw out their. How do you draw out their talents, their energy? By talking. And then they'll give forth its water. You can go around beating people. You can beat your employees. You can beat your workers. You can beat your children, but you won't get their water. You're going to get water. You're going to get the job done. The pyramid will be built, but it's not going to be their pyramid. It's not going to be something they take pride in, they love. It's mine. You're not developing their qualities, their intelligence, them. You're developing the idea maybe, but not them. You want to take out its water, you have to talk to them. You have to communicate. And then you'll get its water, not the water. And that's why the rock gives water. Of course, it got hit twice by Moshe. Of course, it got water. You know, I'll patch you twice. Of course, you're going to do what I say, but why twice? So, commentary, it's a simple commentary. I'll share it anyway, because it didn't listen to the first. Likewise, the commentary, Clay Yocker says, sometimes when a action is motivated by force and coercion, they're not carried out swiftly. You're going to beat them up a lot. When you're beating someone to get the job done, one whack is not going to do it. When you're a torturer, you need multiple whacks. That's why Moshe hit twice, to show that coercion is not the way. It's never going to be with one word. You know, my husband always says when I tell the kids what to do, I tell them too many times. Fold the laundry. Did you fold the laundry? Are you going to fold the laundry? Come fold the laundry. I don't see the laundry folded. My husband says, listen, Freida.
I'm with you.
Say it. Stand at the bottom of the steps and say, hello, please fold the laundry, and walk away. What's with the 4 or 5 times repetition?
That only works if your husband says it one time. It only works when your husband says it one time.
Not when the mother says it. So now,
Exactly.
But what about Moses?
what about Moses? Go ahead. What's the question?
That punishment didn't fit the crime because he was from that. So where were his words? I know this sounds
No. I'm coming to that in 1 second.
okay. Like you know, God, he's been through so much. And I'm sorry, I'm not on video, am I?
It's
You
a
know,
beautiful question, and I'm getting to it right now. Beautiful.
okay. He must be exhausted. Let's think about that.
Yeah. Poor Moshe. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. By the way, we didn't even get to the deepest part. This was one little part. We have more to go. Good. There's enough time. So, let's go to Moshe, because a question was asked by one of our
It's
students.
Jane. I don't think I have my camera on.
Jane. Hi, Jane. How's your grandchild?
Everybody's a little sick right now. That's why I don't have my camera on, but we're all a little sick. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, what we have to look at it from a whole different way. Moshe, like we discussed in the other Torah portion, I want to reiterate, it's very powerful. Moshe's generation, the Jews he took out of Egypt, passed away in the desert. Right? Remember, this is the next generation, and a captain does not leave its ship. Moshe's ship, Moshe's people, Moshe's congregants and students all died out in the desert. They did not enter into the land of Israel. It's 40 years. Moshe remains with his people. Moshe's mission, Moshe's shlichus, Moshe's purpose in life was finished right now before they enter into the land of Israel. He completed his mission in life, and now his soul has to return to its maker, so to speak. So Moshe's mission is completed at this point. And the parable is given by the Medrash, the following parable I want to share with you. That a king gave a shepherd. Remember, Moshe is called a shepherd. A king gave his shepherd 600,000 sheep to watch. And the shepherd took beautiful care of these sheep. And one day, the sheep were taken away by ruthless robbers. They stole the sheep. And the shepherd comes back to the king. And the king says, so nice to see you, but where are your sheep? Where are my sheep? Where are my flock? And the shepherd says, I'm sorry, your majesty. They were taken away by kidnappers, thieves. The king says to the shepherd, go back and only come back to me when you all have my sheep with you, my flock. So the Medrash is saying, God says to Moshe, your flock have all passed away in the desert. They're all buried here. You'll be buried with them, even though we don't know Moshe's burial place. And when Mashiach comes, and there's Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection, and your flock are returned, so to speak, you will come back with them and enter into the land of Israel. And then you'll be together once again. So this is what the Medrash explains here. So on one hand, you could say Moshe was punished. On the other hand, you could say, if you look based on Kabbalah and Chassidus, Moshe finished his shlichus on earth. He did what he was meant to do, and he did it very well. And he remains with his people. And he remains with his people. You know, in the next Torah portion, he begs and begs and begs and cries. And God said, enough. This is my decision. This is my decision. And going back to the Surah and the Selah is now Yahushua has to continue leading the people. The new generation is now going to be led by Yahushua, by the new reality. Remember also that one more beautiful point I read, Moshe is the miracle man. The desert was a life of miracles, remember? That's why the Meraglim, the spies, jeopardized the mission. Remember we spoke how they self-sabotaged? They spoke out about Eretz Yisrael not because they didn't believe God could take them in. They self-sabotaged because they said Moshe will die and we'll go into Eretz Yisrael. Their love for Moshe was so great, they didn't want to go in without him. And they also said, once we go into Israel, the miracles will be gone. We're going to have to set up police stations and courts of law and grocery stores and supermarkets and medical centers. We're going to have to have agriculture. We're going to have to live in the real world. There won't be manna from heaven, water from a rock, laundry service provided, housekeeping, defense by God. We're going to have an army. We're going to have schools. It's going to be awful. So the miracle man, Moshe, who led his nation through miracles, that era is gone now. His shlichus was completed, and God said, from here on now, Joshua will take over and bring the people who are meant to be the next generation into the land of Israel. That's what happened here. That's what happened to here. And that's why also to answer the question, why was there water out of the rock if Moshe didn't listen? God didn't mean that they shouldn't get water. God wanted them to be an educational experience. Sanctify my name meant this could be an opportunity for you to have taught them one of the most pivotal lessons in life by not hitting the rock. Hitting the rock took away that opportunity. You know, sometimes you have a teaching moment, but you don't take it. Right? I was watching once my Hebrew school teacher, a kid asked such a great question. And I was really literally ready to be, I was so upset because she said, we're going to discuss that later. And I'm like, why? Because it's not a topic. So that's one year I sat my teachers down. I said, it doesn't matter if it's not on the topic. If a student asks a question, especially such a beautiful question, jump on it. That's your opportunity. This is the teaching moment you were born for. To say it's not part of what you're teaching. So, so that's it. So we had, this could have been a teaching moment, and it wasn't. It wasn't. Jane, I hope I answered your question somehow, some way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I still feel bad for him though, badly.
You know, it's so sad. I have to tell you, when you read
Yeah.
about Moshe not going into Eretz Yisrael, it's very, very painful. It's not
Yeah.
so, oh, he just didn't go into Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to say anything before I go into something else about this? I want to dig even deeper into this. There's another unbelievable Kabbalistic, Hasidic, mystical insight to something here. So does anybody want to add anything, ask any questions, comments?
I feel like history repeats itself. I mean, look at our world now. Things are changing. It's scary. I mean, I don't know if it's exactly the same because I don't think we're getting better. I don't think it's a moment in time when we're growing and learning as humanity. But
I feel this, I agree with you, Diane. I feel there's a tremendous regression now in how we're educating our children and society at large. Might be too politically heated to get into right now, but yes, I think society
fine.
is regressing terribly now.
I do feel though, on a more of an optimistic, like silver lining note to it. I feel as horrible as the pandemic has been, it kind of, it's like when you lift up a handful of grains of sand, and what's left in your hand is people have pared things down in a way that maybe we were supposed to. Maybe our lives were just going too fast in too many ways, and when you've got to hunker down, you kind of prioritize what's really important. I mean, I wouldn't be here in Westport if it weren't for the pandemic. When I said to my whole family, we lived in the city, and I said, just find a house that we can all fit in. We're running away. As long as the kosher butcher delivers there, I'm good with it, and we just all, we spent that time together with things that were really important. So it
But
depends on whether you take it.
Not everybody could do that.
No, I'm just
a lot of
saying, yes,
complications for a lot of people.
I
made it
feel
more
very
complicated.
grateful that we were able to do it, but I'm just saying, in general lives, people working from home, there were some silver linings where I think people were able to just figure some stuff out for themselves, and let go of some things that weren't important,
And they've grabbed onto kookiness, I think.
Well, there's that. I'm just trying to do the half the glass half full. The glass half full.
Okay, Freida, go ahead.
Just try to grasp onto the few grains that came up that were good.
Good. I agree.
I just lost my headphones.
There's a
1 second.
story. Rabbi Cook was the chief rabbi of Israel during the time, when the British Parliament ruled Israel before we got independence. And
Lost all the sound.
one of the heads of the British Parliament said to Rabbi Cook, "Why are you Jews so obsessed with the Kotel, with the wall? It's a bunch of rocks. What's this obsession with the Kotel, fighting for it, dying for it?" So Rabbi Cook says, like in the Torah portion, there's two types of rock. There's a sela and there's a tzur. The Kotel is made up of both these types of rocks. The Jews that are like hard as a rock. And then you have the Jews that are like soft, sela. They're a rock, and inside you have a little water, a little moisture. So I want like Paula to get back to this because it's very important. Paula, did you hear this?
No, I'm so sorry. My headphones
let
lost
me tell you.
power and I
So-
had to sign off. I apologize. I
No,
missed.
it's fine. So, because it says you love math, I'm bringing something very numerically beautiful now.
Oh,
So
okay,
Harav
shoot.
said to the head of the parliament, there's two types of Jews, there's two types of rocks. There's the Sela and the Tzur. And the Kotel is made up of every type of Jew. The heart is a rock Jew that says, you know what, maybe I was born Jewish, but you know what, I don't know. And then you have the Sela, the Jew that's tough on the outside, but you dig deep inside, there's the soul, the moisture, the Yiddish neshama, the Jewish soul. And he says to the guy, our wall is made up of every type of Jew. And now, this is the clincher. So if you look at the numerical value of the Rak Tzor, you know the Aleph Bet has the numerical values. It's 296. Take Sela, the numerical value, 160. Add them together, you get 456. Now take the word Kotel, 456. The same thing. Same thing. So you see that the Sur and the Tzela, the whole concept, is built into our DNA. You know something about us Jews, it's part of your DNA. You can't separate it. You can't separate it. So you could be a Sela, you could be a Tzur, but you're part of the Kotel, you're part of the divine presence, God himself or herself, God itself. And that's why when Tzur is the same numerical value of Elokim in Kabbalistic literature, Elokim, God's name, is the name of judgment, concealment. Tzur, hard as a rock. And Sela is the same numerical value of God's name, Yud K Vav K, Yud He Vav He, which is the God's name of compassion and revelation. So again, the Sela is the more compassionate, open, revealed part of God, and the Tzur is the concealed part of God, God that judges us at times. You know, like Yom Kippur, we start off with the judgment, we end off with the mercy, with the compassion. So just another I like this very much. It gives a very brings it all together based on Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, which is the secrets of the Torah. So now comes to one more beautiful, beautiful insight. May I share it with you? And this is based on may I? I forgot, I didn't hear if it was a yes, no, okay. Rashi says something that's so perplexing, and I want to just share this because it is so fascinating, okay? Rashi says, so he strikes the rock, right? And God says to him, you know, if you would have spoken to the rock, you could have sanctified my name. You could have made me look good, so to speak. Not because of arrogance, but you could have used this as a teaching moment. And Rashi says like this: had you spoken to the rock, it would have brought forth water, and I would have been sanctified before the eyes of the Jewish people. And they would have said, if this rock, which neither speaks nor hears, fills the word of the omnipresent of God, how much more so should the Jewish people fulfill his word? What was the teaching moment, Rashi says? That when the Jewish people would have seen Moshe say to the rock, rock, please give me water. And the rock would have given water, what would the Jewish people say? Wow! If the rock listens to God so nicely, how much more so we should listen to God so nicely when we come into the land of Israel? This is what Rashi says. So now we have to question this Rashi. Rashi's calling it a kal v'chomer. Have you ever heard the expression kal v'chomer? From the more difficult to the light. I'll give you an example of a kal v'chomer, right? This is used a lot in the Torah liturgy and study of Torah. If Diane ran a 50-mile marathon, kal v'chomer, she could run a 10-mile marathon. If Paula lifted 500 pounds, kal v'chomer, she could lift 10 pounds. Of course, that's kal v'chomer. But how is this a kal v'chomer? People are rocks and rocks are people. Well, Rashi is saying, you know what? The Jewish people will say, if the rock listens so beautifully to God, wow, we should listen to God. But now we, based on Hasidic studies, how is this a comparison? Rocks have feelings, rocks have thoughts. How is Rashi using this as a comparison? So the answer is something so beautiful, so beautiful. The answer is like this, that lo and behold, rocks, flowers, plants, animal life, mammals, inanimate, all have a godly spark. And they're all part of what we call nature, teva. Take a flame, right? What happens when you light a flame? Shoots upward. Turn it upside down, it still point upward. The nature of a flame, that's the nature. It cannot change its nature. Water rushes down, right? Turn your cup upside down, inside out. No matter what direction, the water will flow downward. There's always going to be photosynthesis. Rain will fall down. The sun rises, the sun sets. Why? Why does this all happen in nature? Because God created nature with rules and regulations that they always follow. They never deviate from nature. In the fall, the leaves fall down. In the spring, the leaves bud, right? Did you ever see a tree wake up in the morning? I'm so depressed. I can't do this anymore. I don't want this job. My kids are driving me crazy. My husband is nuts. I can't handle this. I'm staying in bed. You'll never see anything in nature revolt against its process. Right? No dog, no cat, no camel ever said, I'm not going to be a camel today. Changed my mind. I'm not giving milk. I don't want to be a cow. Nature, teva, flows because God created that way, and they listen because they don't have free choice. This is who I am. This is what I do from the moment I'm created to the moment I, whatever, get destroyed or whatever. That's what a rock is. That's what a flower, a tree, and so on. So if there's a miracle and a person sees a miracle happen, of course you're going to follow God's way. Wow, look at that, manna from heaven. Of course I'll make a blessing. I'm getting manna from heaven. It's almost a miracle, it's almost coercion in a sense. If every minute of your life God speaks to you and whispers in your ear, like I said, and every time you take a misstep, you got a bolt of lightning on your head, of course you're going to listen to everybody, to God every minute of the day. It's like almost you're being coerced to listen. What happens when you go into the land of Israel and there's no more miracles? You're now going to have to live in the real world of nature. You're going to have to plant, you have to earn a living, you're going to have to pay the doctor bills, you have to take your kids to the doctor, you have to get them, checked up. And real life happens. And you go into the real life and you have a choice whether you're going to connect to the divine and follow Torah mitzvahs or you're just going to ignore it. Comes Rashi in saying that a person will say to themselves, just like the rock has its nature to follow the will of God deep, deep down, whether you realize it or not, whether at this moment you're very disconnected or very connected, deep down, you also have that ingrained in you, in your DNA, deep, deep, deep down in your godly soul, to follow, to listen to the voice, inner voice that says, there's a God, there's rules, do this, don't do this, act morally, act ethically, act with kindness, act with goodness. That same nature that is ingrained in the worldly nature is ingrained in the human nature, but we're given free choice. So this is what God tells Moshe, and this is what Rashi is pointing out to us, that we all want to do the divine will like the rock, like the tree, because when they follow nature, they're doing the divine will. That's what's meant for them. But we're given a choice whether we do it or not. So what Rashi is pointing out to us, that just as a rock has a nature, a tree has nature, we too have it. We just have to dig for it. It might not come naturally. It may not come naturally. It may not come easily. because it's deep, deep inside at times. It's deep, deep at times. So by Moshe hitting the rock, he lost the moment to show the Jewish people that sometimes you just have to be soft about it, to tap into who you are, to what you are. You have to be quiet about it. Of course, if you're going to hit somebody, they're going to do the right thing. Yeah, you're not going to do the right thing? I'm going to give you a patch. Of course. What the Rashi's saying here, it's the moments when you're not threatened, when no one is coercing you. Can you tap into your deep part of yourself and reveal who you truly are and do what you are meant to do, which is, of course, follow the divine will, Torah, mitzvahs, make the world a better place, make your life better, make your people around you better, and so on and so forth. So this is really what Rashi is pointing out. Not that we're rocks, we're like rocks. We're like nature in the sense that we also have it. But we have the choice, yes or no. Whereas a rock, a tree, a bird does not have a choice. They're made that way and they don't deviate from that. Let's digest for a second. It's a complicated concept. Does anybody want to add anything or clarify?
Why didn't Moshe know this? Why didn't he follow what God said?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's the quintessential question. But the point here was that Moshe was human, don't forget. And then Moshe, in a sense, was it really a sin, or was it more that Moshe was following his trajectory in a sense? Because again, Moshe was the leader of a people of slaves. So Moshe was following the path of what was, not what will be. What will be. And even if Moshe didn't hit the rock, the question is, would he have gone into the Eretz Yisrael? And no, because again, he is the captain of the ship, the shepherd of the flock, and you stay with your flock, you stay with your ship. But Moshe is the quintessential leader. The Kabbalah explains there's a piece of Moshe in every generation. Every generation has a Moses. In our generation, we always say that Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation. That's why, by the way, I just gave this in a talk a few days ago, in a lecture about the Rebbe. That's why it says in the Torah, we do not know Moshe's burial place. Why? So according to the standard commentaries, because God did not want Moshe's burial place to be a place of idolatry. The nations of the world would come and they would pray by Moses, because Moses was great in the eyes of all humanity, not only by the Jews. So God did not want Moses' burial place to be a place of idolatry and idol worship, and sacrifices would be brought, so he hid the place. But according to Hasidic discussion, is that in a certain way, Moshe never died in the traditional sense. There's a part of Moshe that lives on in every generation, because there's only one Moshe. The same Moshe who took the Jews out of Egypt, gave us the Torah through God, brought us to the borders of Eretz Yisrael. There's a Moshe in every generation that will reenact that. Remember, we're now also enslaved. We're also in Golus, in exile. So there will be Moshe will take us to the promised land, so to speak, when Mashiach comes. That will be the Moshe of our generation to lead us there.
Weren't there other reasons why he wasn't going to be allowed to go to the promised land?
I didn't see any other reasons except what I shared. There's more explanation, there's more analysis, deeper analysis, more complex analysis.
No, with the golden calf or with all that.
The golden calf was not Moshe's sin. Moshe broke the tablets to save the Jewish people.
The tablets, right.
After the sin of the golden calf, remember what happens? God says, I'm going to wipe you all out of the Torah. I'm going to wipe them all out, and you'll be I'm going to rebuild the nation through you. You'll have more children. And Moshe says, oh, you're going to do that? Take me away too. Cut me out of your Torah. I don't want my name mentioned here. If you're going to take my people, take me with them. Moshe, throughout his life, was one with the people, and the people one with him. Time and time again, he put himself on the line in ways like nowhere else. Perhaps also, let me tell you something else. I saw something else. I can't develop it because I can't remember. I saw something else that when Moshe hit the rock to really protect the people, in a sense, to deflect the anger from the people to him, where God would say, look, he hit the rock, and deflect the anger from the people. But that's a whole nother discussion, how maybe Moshe hit the rock, not so much because he wasn't listening to God, because again, he didn't want to draw attention to the rebelliousness of the people when they just saw all these miracles, again, crying, when everything keeps happening for them in a positive way. Why did they cry out, there's no water? What did they think? God would let them die in the desert? So maybe Moshe was deflecting the anger towards himself. Now God will focus on me, not on the people. So
Didn't
pardon?
didn't that make him look like he had a temper, which is not a good quality to show the people?
I think Moshe's temper, if you want to call it that, was calculated. Everything Moshe did was so a temper. You know what it says? The beautiful thing I read in Code of Jewish Law, that when you're angry, it's like worshiping idolatry. Why?
Right.
We spoke about it, right? Idolatry, because what you're saying is that God is not in charge of the world. I am. You're showing anger because this was meant to happen to me. Look who I am. So Moshe's temper is, and it says Moshe Anav Mikol Adam. Moshe is the most humblest of all people. A temper is a sign of ego and arrogance. How dare this happen to me? Wow. Now I'm going to get back. I'm so angry, whatever your reaction. Moshe's, to me, it's not a temper. It's more, again, standing up for the people. Standing up for the people. And you know what? A leader that doesn't point out to his people a wrongdoing is no leader. A leader that can't say to people, you know, you're rebels. You really are rebels here. What kind of leader does that? A leader has to stand up and tell his people right from wrong. How could you not see God's hand in everything? So I would maybe not use the word temper, more as showing leadership, sometimes to his own detriment, again, to his own detriment. Because one of the commentaries said he called them rebels, and that's why he was punished. So you see, the commentaries do criticize Moshe. And we put Moshe under a microscope because he's Moshe. You know, when you call your kids brats, it's not documented in the Torah. When you say to your kids, you're ungrateful, you know, like my sister-in-law tells me a story that her parents were away right before Passover, and she was in charge at age 14 to clean the entire house. And her mother walks in the day before Pesach, opens up a cabinet and says, you forgot shelf paper on this shelf. Not, oh my gosh, honey, you did a gorgeous job. You forgot the shelf paper. So, you know, Moshe is not a regular run-of-the-mill fellow here. We see time and time again how calculated it is, and he does things all for the people, for the people. You can't even question him in a sense. Look how he put his life on the line time and time again. He was a fugitive of justice to save one Jew. Now, if he was living in 2022, you know what he would have said. Why should I save one Jew? Let me become king of Egypt because my grandfather will pass away and I'll be the heir apparent. Then I'll bring in all the Jewish ministers and I'll give the Jews their rights. In 20, 30 years, it'll be a democracy. That's how we would say it in 2022. Moshe says, no, one Jew is going to be killed. I'm stepping in right now. I don't care what my future holds. That's a true leader of the Jewish people. One Jew cannot die. Yeah, in 20 years from now, I might be the king of Egypt, but guess what? Now there's a Jew who's going to die if I don't step in. I'll be a fugitive, but I'll save the Jew. So whole Moshe's mindset is not like what you would call a normal self-centered mindset. Because in a sense, that's a little bit self-centered too. In a few years, my grandfather will die. I'm the heir apparent. I'll be the king. I'll set up the ambassadors. I'll give democracy and freedom to the Jews. I'll change the constitution. It's going to be wonderful. Baruch Hashem. He doesn't do that. That's the quintessential Jewish leader. One sheep is lost. I'm going to go find that sheep. Remember, he goes to find the sheep and then he meets the burning bush. Time again, his personality speaks for itself. You cannot question him in a sense. Not because you can't question him, but because look how his behavior just is the same over and over. For the people, with the people, to the last minute, the people. That's Moshe, the beauty of Moshe. Like he's such a hero. He's such a role model for us. If we could each be like, if I could be like a quarter percent in that selflessness, it's something spectacular. So we didn't have time to cover the concept of decrees. Chukat. I had a very beautiful thing from Sigmund Freud, but we'll do it another time. You know, I love psychology.
I'd love to hear it.
What? Pardon?
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, we all would.
Do you want to stay on a few more minutes? I don't want to
Yes.
keep anybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can, Freida.
Let me finish off with Moshe. So to finish off this point is Moshe is the quintessential leader. He strikes the rock. But even though he strikes the rock, we learn something so pivotal, the concept of honey, taking things with honey, then what do you say? What's that expression? Better with honey than with?
Catch more flies with honey than with salt.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
catch more
Vinegar.
flies with honey.
Yeah,
Exactly.
catch more flies with
Yeah.
honey.
Honey is the first approach. And then we're going to learn more about Moshe's demise, which is so sad and so heartbreaking. But look, this Torah portion is very traumatic. Miriam passes away, Aaron passes away, and we're going to read about how Moshe is passing away soon and not entering into the land of Israel. So it's a very traumatic Torah portion. And also think about Moshe's trauma. His two siblings pass away. When he hits the rock, Miriam had just died. Think of the psychological trauma there. His sister was with him from the minute he was put into the Nile River till the very end, you know? So think about that a little bit, you know, the human story,
Yeah.
right? Think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason he hit the rock. Miriam wasn't there as a
Yeah.
source of support, you know?
Yeah, that's what I meant. He was exhausted. It's sad.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try to condense this as short as possible so I don't keep you longer than necessary. Okay. So the Torah portion is called Chukat, which means decrees. And very briefly, we said before there's three types of mitzvahs. Decrees, two type, edus, which is a testimony, like we bench lulav and etrog to remember the Sukkot, leaving Egypt. We light menorah to remember Hanukkah. And then there's a mitzvah of mishpatim, which is common sense mitzvahs. Don't kill, don't steal, don't be jealous, share, be kind, and so on. So the question is, what's the story with the chukot? Anybody, first of all, an example of a chok, anybody know? What's an example of a mitzvah that's called a decree? No reason given.
Kosher?
Kosher, mikvah, the red heifer, shatnez, don't mix wool and linen. So these are kind of mitzvahs that don't make sense. God said, do them because I said so. Maimonides and the great masters, sages, right? Doesn't mean you shouldn't analyze them and find reason and logic behind them, but God says, do them because I said so, not because you understand them. So though we do find reasoning and logic as we analyze and dig into these mitzvahs, we do them because God said so. And why is this necessary? Why is this necessary that God gives us a group of mitzvahs that are decrees? So I spoke of this many times. We discussed it, how, remember, this is a relationship. It's a relationship between mankind and God. The Jews, a Jewish person, and Almighty God. A husband, God, and a wife, the Jewish people. Now, if it's a relationship between two human beings, you and your best friend, you and your child, you and your husband, and so on, then somebody hurts you, makes a mistake, you say, listen, I lost my faith in you. I lost my faith in you. I no longer can be your friend. You betrayed me. You shared my secrets. I'm no longer your friend. But we know that our relationship with God is not based on logic and understanding. It's based on the fact that God is infinite. We know you're infinite, God, and we do things even when we don't understand it. And by the way, when you do things just because God said so and not because you understand it, that strengthens the relationship, because you're making room for another, I can't say person, but another God in your life. Like when you get married, the he and the she becomes the we. In order to become the we, you have to push away your individualism in a sense. You have to make room for the other person. It's now not all about what you want or he wants, it's about what we want together. The third reality, I call it the three-dimensional marriage. There's no time to elaborate on that, but there's the singular marriage, the dual marriage, and the three-dimension marriage. There's the he and the she, but you make room for the we. Now, there's something in science, and Sigmund Freud talks about this, is there's two parts of the brain. Anybody know what they are? The prefrontal cortex, and there's something called the amygdala, right? The amygdala, did I say it right? Medulla, but they call it the amygdala, whatever, in science. And that's instinct. Scientists have discovered that, what did you call it, Jane? The medulla?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, the medulla responds much quicker than the prefrontal cortex.
Sorry.
So the prefrontal cortex, which is rational thinking, you're driving your car, right? And you see a truck about to hit you, you hit on your brakes, that's called the medulla. It's instinct. Rational is, should I buy this? Should I buy that? Should I do this? Should I do that? And you start rationalizing and thinking and thinking and thinking. So we have both parts in our brain, says Sigmund Freud. Now a guy was in a terrible accident and he lost his amygdala, his instinct, and they studied him. He only had the prefrontal cortex. So he was able to give you 15 scenarios of every decision. But guess what? What do you think happened? He couldn't make a decision. He never acted because he was missing the medulla, whatever. I'm sorry about my pronunciation here. Amygdala, I think it's called. So which comes to show you that it is necessary to have that instinct to be able to act, to be able to do, to be able to perform, to be able to live life. You cannot only rely on rational thought and reasoning. It doesn't work. A whole day you'll be sitting by your computer and looking at all the scenarios. You'll never do anything. So Chukim, in a sense, based on Hasidus, and then I'll get to Freud in a minute, teaches us it's not only God gave us decrees because, it's so, it builds our faith. It develops for us neural pathways on acting instinctively. Because when you only have rational thought, you cannot sometimes move forward. By the time you finish rationalizing everything, you don't act. So Chukim actually developed the neural pathways to allow us to do things instinctively, and that really develops our personality more than rational thought. So by God saying, here, I just wanted to tell the red heifer, God says here, there's a red heifer, right? Now, what is the red heifer? You bring it for an offering, you take the ashes, somebody who comes in who got in contact with somebody who's dead, take the ashes with water, the Kohen, the priest, sprinkles it on the person who came in contact with a dead person. Now that person is pure and they can go into the Beit HaMikdash. But guess what? The Kohen is now impure. Doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's a chok, it's a decree. So by doing things that don't make sense, in a sense, it develops in us instinctive thinking that help us go through life in a much more powerful way. Because if we only rely on rationale, logic, at times life will become too complex. Because by the time we analyze all the scenarios, nothing will happen. So this is one insight. Okay, Paula, you wanted to ask something.
I was going to ask, so the laws in the Shulchan Aruch are they considered chokim as well, or another? Because they also, this is the shoe you put on first, and this is what you put on second. I mean, you could rationalize and say it makes sense, but it speaks to what you're saying now, that it kind of frees you up to think and do other things, because you don't have to think which shoe should I put on first, or et cetera, et cetera. So what?
The Code of Jewish Law is a compilation of chukim, mishpatim, and edus. It compiles all the mitzvahs and how to do them and how to apply them. Now, some of them we can't do now, like the ones with the red heifer. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash, but shatnez, kosher, mikvah. Now, and putting on the shoes and all that are more mishpatim, because there's a reason you do the right side first, your right shoe and then your left shoe. Wash your head of your body in the shower and then the lower part of your body. Those things make more sense. They're more rational reasoning. There's answers to that.
There are. Okay.
Yeah. But by the way, even the chukim, there are analysis and answers. I discussed a few times why we don't wear wool and linen together, why we don't mix milk and meat, why we immerse in a mikvah after the menstrual cycle. So there is a whole discussion on it that really gives you an analysis of why we do it. But we're not doing it because we understand it. We do it because God said so. So basically, in a nutshell, because again, this could be developed for another 40 minutes, is that by doing chukim, we are bypassing the prefrontal cortex, which is rational reasoning, and we're creating new neurological pathways for ourselves and new instinctive behaviors. And this creates powerful change in our lives, by the way. When we start doing mitzvahs, it's not only go great, now I'm such a holy roller. Now I could tell everybody I'm so religious. I'm even more religious than the Rebbitzin. Trust me, you could be much more religious than the Rebbitzin. It's no big deal. But I'm saying it's not there that you should now become, oh my gosh. It's more that you will feel in yourself a certain way of acting that's so much powerful and most growth oriented. So mitzvahs are not only there to keep us in line, like we just discussed, coercion. It's more that it develops your personality, your thought process, your behavior, your relationships, and enhances every part of your life. It really does, in every which way, even the most silly ways, even the most silly ways it develops your relationship. And that's what Freud talks about, thanatos, right? And eros is like the good part of people, the drive for life, and thanatos is the death instinct. This is these two different parts of us that Freud, the great Shlomo Freud. Sigmund Freud's real name was Shlomo, by the way. He was a nice Yiddish boy from the Cheder. Brilliant, but a little bit misdirected at times, but he has some good points. So to sum it all up, chukim, decrees, are not only there because, oh, guess what, guys, do whatever I say. Not as I do as I say, God says. It's there to develop, first of all, the relationship with us and God and our inner soul, and also to develop our thought process. Teach us to sometimes instinct and acting on what is like theoretically right, illogical but right, is sometimes better. Like, think you're fighting a war, right? You know, the hero, he gets up and he shoots up everybody and he saves his comrades. If you would have asked him 5 minutes before that, I don't think you should go do that. How could one man kill so many people on tanks? But guess what? He acted instinctively, not rationally. He saved his battalion. There's so many stories like that of people acting in the most illogical ways and doing the right thing and saving the day, and sometimes to their own detriment. So instinct at times is the way to go. It doesn't mean, and you know what? We also love to rationalize our instincts. You do something instinctively, and then you start saying, well, there's a reason I jumped into the fire and I burnt myself. You see, I was thinking, right? We're always rationalizing our instincts. That's us, that's humanity. So, anyway, we'll rationalize our instincts anyway. So, don't worry. Don't worry. Your defense mechanisms will kick in. You have nothing to worry about. So, anyway, to sum it up, it basically, chukim are there to help us develop ourselves even more, not to turn us into robots, non thinking people, Cults, it's to train us to act it actually higher than logic, above logic. Because guess what? Who created ration and logic? Almighty God. God could have made logic 1 + 1 = 2. God created logic. So God could have also created illogical. So even logic is a godly creation. You only think it's logical because God said, this is logical, this is not. I guarantee you, if God would have made it illogical, illogical, we would have all accepted it. And the last point I want to make before we conclude is that when the world thinks that it's rational to kill, to murder, to steal, to persecute a certain group, the Torah steps in and says, what you might now say no longer applies, is no longer logical, no longer rational, is God's rule. And you do it because God said so, or don't do it because God said so. So at times when murder becomes logical, God says, no, do it because I said so, not because you think it's logical or not logical. You understand my point? That when sometimes society decides something which we always thought was logical, now they decided it's no longer logical to keep people around, to keep elderly alive, to keep disabled people alive. Let's take care of it. That's why you have a Torah that never deviates from the rules. Society might decide tomorrow that it's okay to steal. Everybody can steal. Torah says no. That's also the concept of that even the logical now has to be taken as a decree. God said so. So in other words, we don't walk around being ethical and moral because we understand it. We're ethical and moral because God said, this is ethics, this is morality. This is right, this is wrong. So when you treat everything in your life from that perspective, that it's a godly decree, it's a chok, you can't deviate because God said so. We're not doing it because we get it. We're not doing it because society promotes it. We're doing it because the Torah says so. And that's how we connect to the divine. So we'll conclude at this point. I'm sorry if it got too heavy, too intense.
No, it was great. Thank you.
Don't apologize.